Arthur Penn's Bonnie and Clyde made audiences root for bank robbers.
All right now, it's the stick up. You just take it easy and nothing's gonna happen to you. Honey, give me the money.
Painting them as romantic anti-heroes, smooth, daring, unforgettable. But in real life, there was no glamour, only chaos, brutality, and innocent lives caught in the crossfire. Here are 19 facts about Bonnie and Clyde that Hollywood knowingly left out. Number 19, the Robin Hood lie. The legend arrived long after the damage was done. By the time Hollywood got hold of Bonnie and Clyde, the real victims had been mostly forgotten. The clerks, the station attendants, the small-town shopkeepers who handed over whatever was in the drawer and hoped nobody got shot. The whole idea that Bonnie and Clyde robbed the rich to feed the poor is something that got built later, mostly by people who never lived through that decade. The actual record tells a different story. The Barrow Gang hit gas stations, country grocery stores, roadside cafes, and tiny rural banks in towns most Americans had never heard of. Places like Lawrence, Kansas, Hillsboro, Texas, Lucerne, Indiana. The take from these jobs was usually small, sometimes painfully small. There is a documented robbery where they walked out with around $80, and another where they got less than $10. The people they took from were not bankers in marble offices. They were shopkeepers, clerks, gas station attendants, and farmers who happened to have a few dollars on the wrong day. Many of these victims were already drowning in the same depression that supposedly turned Bonnie and Clyde into folk heroes. No police report, bank statement, or surviving witness ever recorded a single moment of generosity from the pair. In every town where they operated, no family came forward to say the two had left them anything. When Dallas police questioned their families in 1934, the answer was simple. They were broke, running on whatever they had just stolen. Number 18, the boy who came out of Eastham different. Clyde Chestnut Barrow was already trouble long before the world knew his name. He was 16 when the police first picked him up in 1926. Caught with a rented car, he failed to return on time. The next year he was arrested again, this time with his older brother Buck for stealing turkeys. Over the next 4 years, his record filled up with car thefts, burglary charges, and assault. Cops in Dallas knew his face. Everything got worse when he was sent to Eastham Prison Farm in April 1930. Eastham was a place built to break men. The work was brutal cotton labor under armed guards who beat prisoners for moving too slowly. Clyde was 19. Inside, an older inmate named Ed Crowder repeatedly assaulted him. The abuse went on for months. Clyde had no way out and no one to tell. So in October 1931, in the prison washroom, he picked up a length of iron pipe and crushed Crowder's skull. Another inmate, a lifer named Aubrey Skelly, who already had nothing to lose, took the blame. Clyde walked away without a charge. Something inside him changed in that washroom and never changed back. Friends who knew him before said he came home a different person, quieter, colder, shorter fuse. Number 17, the woman who never pulled the trigger. There is a scene in the movie Bonnie and Clyde where Faye Dunaway empties a Browning automatic rifle into a parked car, smiling. It is a great cinematic moment. It also never happened. Bonnie Parker did not shoot anyone. The crime scene reports, the surviving witness statements, and the testimony from gang members who turned on the pair all line up on this point. The trigger pulling was done by Clyde, W.D. Jones, Buck Barrow, and Henry Methvin, never Bonnie. What Bonnie did was almost everything else. She drove getaway cars, she watched the roads, she loaded magazines. In one Joplin incident in April 1933, witnesses saw her hand a Browning to Clyde while he fired. She weighed barely 90 pounds and stood 4 feet 11. The recoil of the bars Clyde stole from National Guard armories would have knocked her flat. None of that mattered legally. Sitting in the front seat while Clyde shot a state trooper at Grapevine, Texas in April 1934 made her a co-defendant. The justice system did not need her to fire a single round. Hollywood had to put a gun in her hand because a woman who only drove and watched did not fit the screenplay. Number 16, a limp, a burned leg, and a Ford with no bed. The romance Hollywood sold was a road trip in the sun. The reality was 2 crippled people sleeping in stolen cars. Clyde walked with a permanent limp. The limp came from prison. He had taken an axe to his own foot at Eastham, cutting off 2 toes, hoping the injury would get him assigned to lighter work. The wound never healed properly. He walked with a noticeable hitch for the rest of his life, and often drove in his socks because shoes hurt. Bonnie was worse. The Wellington crash of June 1933 had poured battery acid down her right leg and burned her down to the bone in places. The leg never healed. She walked with a hard limp when she could walk at all. On bad days, she could not stand. Photographs from late 1933 show Clyde carrying her from the car to wherever they were hiding. 2 young people in their early 20s, both crippled, both running, both sleeping in a Ford that smelled of gun oil and old food. There was nothing glamorous in any of it. There was just survival, stretched thin until it snapped. Number 15, the names nobody remembers. The number is 13. That is how many people died at the hands of the Barrow Gang. 9 of them wore badges. Try to name one. Most people cannot. Doyle Johnson was a 27-year-old father shot through the neck in Temple, Texas, while trying to stop them from stealing his car on Christmas Day, 1932. His son was less than a year old. Malcolm Davis was 51 years old when Clyde shot him in January 1933. He had been a Tarrant County deputy for years. He left behind a wife who was pregnant with their daughter. She raised the child alone through the worst years of the Depression and never received a pension. H.D. Murphy was 22. He was a rookie Texas highway patrolman 3 weeks into the job when Clyde and Henry Methvin opened fire on him at a roadside near Grapevine on Easter Sunday, 1934. He was getting married the following month. His fiancée wore her wedding dress to his funeral. Edward Wheeler was Murphy's partner that day. He had $25 in his wallet when he died. That was probably everything he owned in the world. The Barrow Gang took the lives of working men who left behind widows still alive in the 1980s, still bitter, still waiting for someone to write a movie about their husbands instead. Number 14, the ring she never took off. The woman the world remembers as Clyde Barrow's great love was already married when she met him, and she stayed married to the other man until the day she died. Roy Thornton married Bonnie Parker in September 1926. She was 16. They had grown up in the same poor stretch of West Dallas. She quit school to be his wife and got a small heart tattoo on her thigh that read, Bonnie and Roy. The marriage went bad fast. Thornton drifted in and out of trouble, then disappeared into the prison system on robbery charges in 1929. Bonnie waited a while, then stopped waiting, but she never filed for divorce. When she met Clyde at a friend's house in West Dallas in January 1930, she was still legally Mrs. Roy Thornton. She would stay legally Mrs. Roy Thornton until the moment she died. When officers pulled her body from the Ford in Louisiana, Roy Thornton's wedding ring was still on her finger. So was a small chain bracelet Clyde had given her. 2 men's jewelry, 1 body. The letters police later recovered showed a relationship far messier than any movie ever admitted. Bonnie and Clyde fought constantly. They split up more than once. Her mother begged her to come home. Then she would go right back to Clyde. Number 13, a map that never touched a skyline. There is a list of cities where the big gangsters of the 1930s made their names: Chicago, New York, Kansas City. The Barrow Gang never set foot in any of them. Al Capone ran Chicago with a payroll of corrupt judges and police captains. Lucky Luciano was reorganizing the New York Mafia. Dutch Schultz was running numbers in Harlem. These men had armies, accountants, and lawyers on retainer. The map of Bonnie and Clyde's actual movements is a map of nowhere. Joplin, Stringtown, Wellington, Sowers, Dexter, Iowa, Platte City, Grapevine, Commerce, Sales. Most of these places had populations under a few thousand. The gas stations they hit sometimes had less than $10 in the register. They had no mafia ties, no bootlegging connections, no corrupt cops on payroll, no safe houses in big cities. They could not even get a hotel room without risking their lives. They were 2 kids from West Dallas with stolen weapons and no plan beyond the next county line. Their fame had nothing to do with the size of their crimes. Number 12, 6 guns, a broken guitar, $57. Hollywood likes to imagine outlaws living high. The reality of Bonnie and Clyde's life would have made any audience squirm. They lived in cars, mostly stolen Ford V8s, the model Clyde swore by. They ate in cars, slept in cars, bathed in creeks. They could not check into hotels because their faces were on every newspaper west of the Mississippi by 1933. Clyde walked with a permanent limp from the toes he had cut off in prison. Bonnie was worse. In June 1933, near Wellington, Texas, Clyde missed a detour sign at high speed and rolled their car into a ravine. The car caught fire. Battery acid poured onto her right leg. The burn went down to the bone in places. From that moment on, her leg never properly healed. Clyde often had to carry her. When the ambush came in May 1934, what officers found in the car was not the haul of master criminals. Around $57 in cash, 6 guns, a broken guitar Bonnie kept, a saxophone Clyde had been carrying since he was a kid in West Dallas. That was the entire wealth of 2 of the most wanted criminals in America. Number 11, the sandwich on the floorboard. The end of Bonnie and Clyde came from a deal made in a Louisiana farmhouse, not a manhunt. Henry Methvin had joined the gang in early 1934 after Clyde sprung him from Eastham during the prison raid. He was young, jumpy, and not built for life on the run. By April, his family in Bienville Parish was ready to make a trade. Through a middleman named John Joyner, the Methvins reached out to former Texas Ranger Frank Hamer. The arrangement was simple. They would set up Bonnie and Clyde, and in return, Henry would get a pardon for his crimes in Texas. Methvin's father, Ivy, parked his old log truck on the shoulder of a quiet rural road near Sales, Louisiana, on the morning of May 23, 1934. The truck looked broken down. The road was one Bonnie and Clyde used regularly to reach the Methvin farm. 6 lawmen lay hidden in the pine brush. Hamer was one of them. The others were Manny Galt, Bob Alcorn, Ted Hinton, Henson Prentice Oakley, and Sheriff Henderson Jordan. They had been waiting in that ditch since the night before, sleeping in shifts. Bonnie had bought a bologna sandwich at Ma Canfield's Cafe in Gibbsland that morning. She was eating it when Clyde slowed the gray Ford V8 to check on Ivy's truck. Clyde was driving in his socks, his shoes off as usual on long drives. The first shot came from Oakley. The next 130 or so came from everywhere at once. The shooting lasted maybe 16 seconds. The Ford rolled into a ditch. The sandwich was on the floor of the car next to Bonnie. The keys were still in the ignition. It was not police work that ended them. It was a phone call from a father trying to save his son. Number 10, the Ranger who felt nothing. Frank Hamer was not interested in legends. He had buried too many friends to romanticize anybody on the wrong side of a rifle. By the time Texas pulled him out of retirement in February 1934, Hamer was 49 years old. He had served as a Texas Ranger for most of his adult life and survived more than 50 gunfights. He had been shot at least 17 times. He was tall, quiet, and carried a rifle the way most men carry a wallet. He spent 102 days tracking Bonnie and Clyde. He did not race after them. He sat down with maps and figured out their pattern. They visited family. They drove in loops. They favored certain roads. He did not need to find them. He needed to find where they would be next. After the ambush, he sat for an interview with the Dallas Morning News. He did not call them masterminds. He did not call them lovers. He called them pathetic. He said they had no real skill, except pulling a trigger. When the 1967 film painted him as a coward who got tied up by the gang, his widow Gladys sued Warner Brothers. She lost the case, but won something else. Hamer's actual letters from 1934 came out of court files. In them, he called Bonnie and Clyde lost young people with no way out. The most decorated lawman in Texas history saw 2 kids who had run themselves to death. Number 9, a joke that got away from them. The most famous photograph in the entire Bonnie and Clyde story was a private joke. They never meant for anyone to see it. In April 1933, the gang was holed up in a rented apartment above a garage in Joplin, Missouri. Neighbors complained about the noise. Local police came knocking on April 13th, expecting bootleggers. The gang opened fire. 2 officers died in the gun battle. The gang fled in such a hurry that they left almost everything behind: clothes, weapons, Buck's marriage license, and several rolls of undeveloped film. When the police developed those rolls, they got the images that defined the legend. Bonnie posing with a pistol on her hip. Bonnie with a cigar clenched in her teeth. 1 foot up on a stolen Ford. The 2 of them mugging for the camera like teenagers. Bonnie did not smoke cigars. She smoked Camel cigarettes. The cigar was Clyde's, and she had stuck it in her mouth as a gag. The press got hold of the photos within days. By the end of the week, they were on front pages from Texas to New York. The cigar was the detail every editor latched onto. According to her mother, Bonnie was crushed when she saw the coverage. She wrote home apologizing. She asked her mother to tell people she did not actually smoke cigars. It did not matter. The photo was already gone from her. Number 8, the decade that built them. In 1932, around 1 in 4 working Americans had no job. In Texas, the number was worse. Banks were foreclosing on family farms every week, and the families who lost those farms were sleeping in their cars or walking west toward California. Clyde Barrow grew up in this. The Barrow family had lost their farm and moved to West Dallas. They lived for a while under their wagon, sleeping beneath it because they could not afford rent. Bonnie's family was not much better off. Her father had died when she was 4, and her mother raised 3 children on a seamstress's wages. The Depression created the conditions where 2 kids like that could imagine guns and stolen cars as a way out. Historians do not argue with this part. The misery of that decade pushed thousands of poor young men into petty crime, and a few of them, like Clyde, kept going past petty. 13 people died because of the choices Bonnie and Clyde made. One of them was Doyle Johnson, 27 years old, shot on Christmas Day while trying to stop them from stealing his car. His violence did not feed the poor. It made one more poor family. The Depression explains how Bonnie and Clyde came to exist. It does not erase what they did once they did. Number 7, the headlines that wrote history. By the spring of 1933, editors at the Dallas Morning News and the Kansas City Star had figured out something most of their readers had not. A photo of Bonnie Parker on the front page sold more papers than anything else they could print. The pair were a gift to a dying industry. Newspapers were folding across the Midwest. Subscriptions were being canceled by readers who could not afford bread. Editors needed circulation, and circulation needed faces. Bonnie's face with that cigar between her teeth was the answer, so they made a choice. Reporters who interviewed the families of the dead officers found their stories buried on page 7. Reporters who turned the gang into a love story found themselves above the fold. The widows did not sell papers. The romance did. The Robin Hood legend did not come from the people of Texas. It came from typewriters and newsrooms run by men who knew that fiction moved more copies than fact. Number 6, the poem she mailed before she died. 2 weeks before the Louisiana ambush, Bonnie Parker dropped an envelope in the mail. Inside was a poem in her handwriting titled, "The Story of Bonnie and Clyde." She sent it to several newspapers. The Dallas papers ran it after she was dead. The final verse describes the 2 of them being shot down together by the law, not as a fear, as a certainty. She wrote it the way you write the end of a book you have already read. Bonnie had been writing since grade school. Her teachers in Cement City remembered her as one of the brightest students they had taught. She had won spelling contests and writing prizes. Her notebooks, seized later by police, contained dozens of poems. She was 23 years old when she sealed that final envelope. Historians who studied the manuscript came away with the same uneasy reading. Bonnie knew. She had stopped trying to escape it. Some scholars believe that by that point, she did not want to. The poem was not a warning. It was a goodbye letter she wrote and mailed to herself, addressed to America. Number 5, the mother who never forgave. Emma Parker buried her daughter in May 1934 and spent the next 30 years correcting strangers about who Bonnie really was. In interviews she gave during the 1950s, Emma did not speak about romance. She spoke about a daughter taken from her by a violent man. According to Emma, Bonnie tried to leave Clyde at least twice. The first time she came home for weeks and told her family she was done. The second time, she had decided to walk into a Dallas police station and turn herself in. Clyde found out. He drove to the house, pulled her into the car, and drove away, while Emma stood on the porch screaming after him. The Barrow family told a different story. They said Bonnie stayed because she wanted to stay. Cumie Barrow, Clyde's mother, insisted nobody forced anybody. The 2 families agreed on almost nothing, but on one point, they were unanimous. Neither side ever accepted the love story Hollywood would later sell. Both mothers died believing their children deserved a different ending than the one history gave them. Number 4, a movie that almost died. When Warner Brothers released Bonnie and Clyde in August 1967, the studio gave it almost no marketing budget. Executives thought it was going to flop. They were nearly right. Bosley Crowther at the New York Times tore the film apart, calling it irresponsible and morally confused. Variety dismissed it as too violent. Time ran a sour review. The opening box office was weak. Theaters started pulling it. But the timing had other ideas. The country was tearing itself apart over Vietnam. Riots had burned through Detroit and Newark that summer. Young Americans had stopped trusting institutions and started looking for rebels. A film about two outlaws running from the law landed differently in that climate than it would have in any other. Pauline Kael published a defense of the film in The New Yorker that ran 9,000 words. She argued that the ferocity of the backlash was itself evidence of the film's power, that only work with real force generates that kind of hostility. Warren Beatty accused the studio of neglect and threatened legal action. Warner Brothers gave it a wide release. It became a cultural event, 10 Academy Award nominations. A generation of American filmmakers took notes. The look, the violence, the moral ambiguity, all of it filtered into what Hollywood produced for the next decade. Bonnie and Clyde, The Criminals, became a fashion statement. Faye Dunaway's beret, Warren Beatty's suit. None of it had anything to do with what the real pair had actually done. It had everything to do with when the movie came out. Number 3, the lawman the state pretended not to see. Frank Hamer ended the Barrow Gang in 16 seconds of gunfire. The state of Texas thanked him by ignoring him for the rest of his life. The problem was the legality of the ambush. No surrender had been offered. No warning had been given. 6 lawmen had simply opened fire on a moving car. In 1934, this was already controversial enough that the Department of Public Safety, the Rangers, and the Texas legislature decided the safest political move was silence. Hamer received no medal, no ceremony, no formal letter of thanks from the governor. He went back into private security work and lived another 21 years without an official acknowledgement of the most famous case of his career. He died in 1955. His widow, Gladys, spent decades trying to clear his name after the 1967 film painted him as a coward. She lost her lawsuit but kept campaigning. Recognition finally came in 1976 when the Texas Rangers formally honored Hamer at the Texas Rangers Hall of Fame. Number 2, the other names in the car. Everybody knows 2 names. The actual gang had more. Buck Barrow, Clyde's older brother, joined in March 1933, right after his pardon from prison. He took part in the Joplin shootout and several robberies that followed. In July 1933, at a tourist camp in Platte City, Missouri, the gang got cornered by police. Buck took a bullet through the temple. He lingered for almost a week, half conscious, before dying in an Iowa hospital. He was 30 years old. His wife, Blanche, was arrested at the same shootout. Glass from a shattered window had nearly blinded her. She was 22. She served 6 years in federal prison. W.D. Jones was 16 when he joined Clyde in late 1932. He fired his first gun in a robbery weeks later. He was caught in November 1933 and testified against Bonnie and Clyde at trial. Henry Methvin, the last man in, was the one who set up the Louisiana ambush in exchange for a deal for his father. The two against the world story Hollywood loved was a fantasy. The Barrow Gang was a rotating crew of broke kids, and the betrayal that ended it came from inside. Number 1, 2 years that were never theirs. Do the math nobody ever does. Bonnie met Clyde in January 1930. By April of that year, he was back in jail on car theft. He was paroled in February 1932. Of the 4 years between their first meeting and the Louisiana ambush, almost 2 were spent with Clyde behind bars. The actual free time they had together added up to around 25 months. And those 25 months were not a relationship in any normal sense. They slept in stolen cars. They crossed state lines weekly. They went weeks without a real meal. They could not stop in towns where they might be recognized. They could not write letters without coding them. They could not sleep in the same place twice. Bonnie went home to her mother for stretches because the road was unbearable. Clyde would come pull her back. There was no honeymoon, no quiet weekend, no Sunday morning, just running. Hollywood took 2 years of constant fear and turned it into a love story. The truth is harder. They did not have a relationship. They had survival until they did not. Don't miss the videos on screen now. They're just as interesting. Catch you in the next one.